Hello and welcome to another episode of the DVD Graveyard. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at Sleepaway Camp from 1983, directed by Robert Hiltzik. And this is a movie that pretty much every time, around this time of year, late spring, early summer, it really puts me in the mood to watch movies like Friday the 13th is one that always goes on. I think I mentioned that in my review. The Burning, that's another one that I always find myself wanting to watch. And then, of course, Sleepaway Camp. This is kind of in that early 80s slasher boom, of course, and it definitely fits right in there. Now it does kind of stand out a little bit, kind of amongst those, and I think that's why it has such a cult following. Just in the fact that it is definitely that kind of classic slasher trope, but this movie always to me felt a little bit different than something like Friday the 13th or The Burning. This one just kind of did its own thing. It had some more kind of unique kills in it, which we'll discuss that more as we get into it, because I kind of want to talk about the kills as a whole. But like I said, this movie is just it's a lot of fun. I remember seeing this one all the time when I'd go to the video store to rent movies. Just seeing this one on the shelf, and more specifically Sleepaway Camp 2, Unhappy Campers. That cover art always really just stood out to me, and it's one that I always remember seeing every time I went there. Now, I didn't actually see this movie for the first time until, many years later. I mean, probably 5 to 6 years ago at this point, when I finally got the Blu-ray copy of it from Scream Factory. I got that one, and that was kind of my first viewing of the movie, because I think I had seen it maybe on TV, just kind of here and there, but I'd never actually sat down to watch it. And like I said, this one really does fit in perfect with some of those kind of early 80s slasher films, and it's definitely it has that kind of camp vibe to it. And the one thing that I think really kind of makes this one stand out amongst those, besides just the unique kills, is this one actually has a really nice summertime camp feel. And we get the kids and the teenagers actually at the camp with the kind of killer going around and everything. So it always that was one thing I really liked about it. And this movie just has a really fun kind of vibe to it. It feels like summertime whenever you put this on, and I love it. I mean, it's just such a fun time. So this is a cult classic at this point. I think almost everyone who's a horror fan at this point has seen Sleepaway Camp. But if you haven't, I highly recommend you see this. I'm going to read the back of this DVD that I have here. Now this DVD came from the coveted Sleepaway Camp survival kit, which I actually just picked up, I think 2 years ago, or maybe it might have been last year. I finally just bit the bullet. Now it's not the actual the super hard to find out of print one with the red cross on the cover. It's just the standard kind of survival kit one, but it's a box set that I'd wanted for a long time. I mean, even before I had seen this movie, because I know that the first Sleepaway Camp, besides that Scream Factory set, I know it was kind of hard to get there for a while, at least for me anyway. I didn't find it anywhere. And then the Scream Factory versions of Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 are almost impossible to get your hands on without spending an arm and a leg for them. But this is the DVD from that box set. I was so happy to finally get that. I actually got it for a pretty decent price. I think I paid like $50 or $60 for it, something like that. So I'm really happy to finally have that in the collection. So anyway, I'm going to read the plot synopsis of the back of the DVD for the first one in there. So, welcome to Camp Arawak, where teenage boys and girls learn to experience the joys of nature as well as each other. But when these happy campers begin to die in a series of horrible accidents, they discover that someone or something has turned their summer of fun into a vacation to dismember. Has a dark secret returned from the camp's past? Or will an unspeakable horror end the season forever? From its grisly special effects to the truly shocking climax, Sleepaway Camp is no ordinary body count movie. See for yourself why this killer thriller spawned 2 sequels and became one of the most surprising horror hits of the 80s. So I think that's a really good way to describe it. That is one thing. I'll talk more about the ending, but if you haven't seen this movie, the ending, I went into it already knowing what the ending was going to be, but this movie does have a really shocking and kind of very surprising ending, something that you definitely will not see coming, if you don't know So this movie has a pretty big cast, but kind of our main two people that we're following are going to be Felissa Rose, who plays Angela Baker, and then Jonathan Tiersten, who plays Ricky, who is her cousin. So basically, this movie, when it starts out, we kind of get this scene at Camp Arawak, where everyone is kind of swimming and doing their thing and boating in the lake, and there's these two kids there with, I'm assuming is their dad. I can't remember off the top of my head if it's their dad or just somebody that's taking them out to the lake, like an uncle or cousin or whoever. And so there's basically this horrible boating accident, and it kills it kills the guy that they are there with, and this girl is screaming in the water and freaking out. And then we fast forward to 8 years later, and that is where we are first introduced to Angela and Ricky. So they live. This is Angela's aunt, and she is a very odd character. She's very strange. Her dialogue is very strange, and I've always really kind of wondered why she's like that. Just the way that she kind of reads her script. She's almost acting like she's acting in a play or something like that, which, that kind of adds to the charm of this movie. And that's one thing I do want to say, note before I get too far into it, is that's kind of a one thing about this movie is a lot of the acting is just awful in this movie, and it's not any worse than something like Friday the 13th or something like that. So just kind of knowing that, kind of going in, that you're going to get some really poor acting and some kind of silly dialogue, but honestly part of it feels still kind of very real, and I think that's mainly due to the fact that a lot of the characters actually have pretty decent chemistry on screen. Which I'll talk again more about that in just a second. So basically, when they get to Camp Arawak, Ricky and Angela, Ricky's been there before, and he's kind of hanging out with his buddies, and Angela's just this kind of shy, very quiet girl. She doesn't really talk a lot. She doesn't say hardly anything throughout the first half of this movie. And basically, when they're at the camp, everybody kind of starts picking on Angela, and we also get introduced to one of the most disgusting characters in this movie. When the teens are having lunch, one of the kind of head counselor guys who comes over in like the shortest shorts I've ever seen. And he basically takes Angela to the kitchen because he's going to get her something to eat, that she actually likes. So just a quick side note before I get into this part of the movie is I think, us as men, I think these really short shorts need to make a comeback, guys. Well, I mean, I think so. I mean, your balls are almost hanging out everywhere you go. I mean, that was the time. These are some short shorts. I mean, like very, very short. I don't know how this guy's sack isn't just hanging out every 5 seconds in this movie. But anyway, she goes into the kitchen, and basically the cook guy who works here, he tries to molest her more or less, and of course they're stopped by Ricky. He ends up catching them, and later on the guy is cooking in this soup, this big giant soup pot, and he is killed in a very unique way. Basically, the guy is standing on this chair trying to get in this soup pot, and it's this boiling pot, and we don't see who it is. We just know somebody comes in there, and we know it's a kid because of the way that the guy's talking. And a hand pulls this chair out from underneath him, off screen, and he falls and pulls the entire pot of boiling water down on top of him. And he just lays there screaming and freaking out. So that is our first kill. That is very brutal. I mean, it's such a horrible way to go. And the effects are done really well. Like, the guy's skin is boiling and all blistered and just looks awful. And it's just such, I mean, he honestly got what he deserved, to tell you the truth, because this character was a piece of shit. But that's our first kill in the movie. And it's actually very, again, a very unique kill. So a lot of the kills in this movie are very, very unique. I mean, it's not just your typical kind of slashings and stabbings, of a typical slasher movie of this era. So that's one thing that I really appreciate, and I think that actually made this movie kind of stand out. And so basically, as that happens, our kind of main guy who kind of runs the camp, who is Mike Kellen, by the way. He plays Mel, and this was actually, I think, his last film performance. I think he actually passed away shortly after this film, and he does a fine job in this movie. But basically, he's trying to kind of be the mayor from Jaws, more or less, and kind of keep everything sort of under wraps. He doesn't want to tell any of the kids about what happened, that there was a murder, and of course the police come to kind of investigate everything and see what's going on. He's again trying to kind of keep this under wraps, and basically, we just get a lot of really, some camp shenanigans. Like the kids are hanging out and playing, and they go swimming, and they're playing volleyball and stuff like that. And we're really kind of following Angela, throughout the movie. And she again is just this quiet kid. All the girls end up, they tend to make fun of her quite a bit. So, that's kind of what's going on. And like I said earlier, this movie is just really fun, and it has a really nice summertime vibe to it. I mean, it just, again, feels like summertime, like whenever you watch this. And that's something I really like about it. Again, I think I said this in my Friday the 13th review, but some of these slasher movies, we don't just watch them just to watch people die. I mean, believe me, that is a big part of it. It's like we like to see these horrible, violent murders. But, I mean, for the most part, to be honest with you, or a big part of it goes into the fact that it's just about watching people have fun and have a good time, and it kind of reminds you of it reminds me again of my childhood of going to the lake and going camping and hanging out with my friends and stuff like that. That's kind of what it makes me think of. Same thing with Friday the 13th. Like those are, to me, are just kind of movies about watching people kind of have a good time, but at the same time there is horrible, it's juxtaposed against these horrible acts of violence that are being thrust upon all of our main characters. So yeah, it's just a really fun time, and just a lot of really interesting things going on in this movie. Again, it's a very camp movie. So as we go on throughout the movie, Angela meets this boy named Paul, who she kind of starts to get a crush on, and she actually starts to talk to him. She comes out of her shell a little bit, and when she's being kind of picked on throughout this whole movie, Ricky kind of keeps coming to her defense and basically fighting anybody who starts shit with Angela. He's very protective of her. And so we're honestly kind of led to believe that Ricky is the one that's doing this throughout the whole movie. Even Mel, the head counselor guy, he kind of starts to think it's Ricky. And he actually starts to blame a lot of the stuff on Ricky, even though, he doesn't have any solid evidence. But that's just kind of where he's leaning towards. And like I said earlier, we get a lot of really unique kills. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the kills now. Very interesting stuff, like that first kill with the pot of boiling water. That is just, as soon as you see that, you're like, okay, I'm in for something a little bit different, not just your typical stabbings and things, which, I mean, we do get that, that we do get some of that, but for the most part, all of them are not just that typical somebody gets stabbed and dies. So, we get that kill with the boiling pot of water. Another one that I always thought was really interesting is whenever one of the kids is making fun of Angela, and he ends up going into the bathroom or something, and somebody cuts a hole in the screen door in this bathroom, basically, and drops a beehive in there, and then, of course, the bees swarm all over this kid and kill the kid. That's a really, really cool little that's a really cool kill that we get in this movie that's very different. There's another scene where one of the kids is actually drowned. He's in a boat, and he ends up kind of screwing with one of these girls and knocking her in the water, and then, the back of somebody's head comes up and drowns him, and we don't see who it is, of course, but drowns him, and then he's found the next morning in the boat, and they flip the boat over, and the kid is laying there, and he's like a snake crawls out of his mouth. Very, very cool. There's another scene with like a curling iron, which I won't really go in depth with, but that's also a really gnarly kill. We don't really see a whole lot of it. Most of it is implied, but still, that's pretty rough. So again, like I said, a lot of really unique kills, a lot of really, really good special effects for the time. Again, it's very reminiscent of, it's not as good as something like Friday the 13th, but still, we do get some really cool, unique stuff, and that's what really makes this movie kind of stand out for me, is just that uniqueness of it. And on a quick side note, I'm trying not to just sit here and compare it to Friday the 13th, because, I mean, that's not something, I think this movie does kind of stand on its own, but I do believe it was a product of, kind of what Friday the 13th had started. But again, I'm not trying to just compare them directly. I think they make really good companion pieces. I think they'd be a good little double feature to watch, the first Friday the 13th and then put on Sleepaway Camp. I think that would be a really good little, double feature. Maybe I'll do that in a video one day. I'll talk about double features. Love a good double feature. Anyway, so kind of as we go on, like I said, Mel is just trying to cover up all of these kills, and these deaths, I should say, and doesn't really want anybody to know, what's going on. So he eventually, like I said, he ends up being killed in a very unique way with the arrow through the throat. I thought that was really cool. Again, more of a kind of straightforward kill, but at the same time, it's just very, very different. And so we kind of all build up to this really big climax. And if you hadn't seen this movie, I don't know if you'd really see this twist coming. I already knew, going into this movie, which is a shame. I would have loved to have seen this and kind of been surprised, but again, this movie is over 40 years old at this point. So it's one of those things where you can try to avoid as many spoilers as you want. Like I said, the twist ending is great, and if you have not seen this and you don't know what's gonna happen, I urge you to turn this off and go and find this movie, sit down and watch it on your own. So basically, what this boils down to is the counselors are looking for Angela because she's kind of disappeared, and we're starting to kind of discover, all these murders, and that the kids are that people are being killed. And basically, when they find her, she is on the beach with the boy that she's kind of been dating, more or less, I guess you could say, or just kind of hanging out with and crushing on and stuff. And she turns around and stands up, and or at least we see we see Angela sitting there, and she turns around and she's holding the boy's severed head in one hand, and she's got like a knife or a machete in the other hand. I can't remember. And it's just this iconic shot of her sitting there with her mouth wide open and kind of making these weird sounds, and so that is when it is confirmed that Angela has been the killer this entire time. And not only that, we pan out and we learn that Angela has a wiener. I said it. I was just going to come right out and say it just like that. Angela is a boy, and she has been a boy this entire time. And basically we kind of get just a hint of backstory in there. When Angela moved in with her aunt, she had always the aunt always wanted a daughter instead of a son. So she because she couldn't have one boy or two boys. It had to be balanced. She needed a boy and a girl. So she basically sort of brought Angela up, kind of believing that she is a girl. It turned him. Basically, Angela was a boy. The aunt kind of more or less pushed the sex change onto her, and she is now Angela. She is now she was presenting as a girl. So, crazy twist ending. I could not imagine seeing that in 1983. I mean, I'm sure that blew people's freaking minds seeing that, and just that big reveal. Because again, a lot of horror films, like again something like Friday the 13th or like Halloween, they have that kind of shocker ending. But this one definitely takes the cake. This is a big time, like, holy shit moment. Like, I did not see that coming, at all. So after that, of course the credits roll, and that is Sleepaway Camp from 1983. So like I said, this is a really fun movie. It's one that I always really like to watch around this time of year. It is definitely one that I would recommend if you are a big time, slasher fan, especially from this era. This movie does fit into that pocket really, really nicely. And like I said, I don't think, I think it's pretty common knowledge now, how good Sleepaway Camp is. And I think a lot of people, this movie does get a lot of credit now. I think it got a little overshadowed by a lot of other films, but this one didn't really fall into that trap. So again, something like The Burning or like Madman, something like those films, or The Prowler, those were a lot of just kind of one and done movies, and there's nothing wrong with that. I don't see a problem with that, because those movies are great, even though some of them may have deserved a sequel. But this one, kind of rose above that and did end up having its own franchise. Now, it's not a huge franchise by any means, but it did kind of rise above that and did get a few sequels, and pretty decent sequels, to be honest with you. Like, I love the first Sleepaway Camp, but to be honest with you, I think my favorite one in the series is Sleepaway Camp 2. I love that movie to death. It is ridiculous. It is so much fun, and it's batshit crazy. And then, of course, you get Sleepaway Camp 3. That one is still a good time. It's not as good as the first two by any means, especially the second one. The second one, again, like I said, really takes the cake. I think that's my favorite one, because it's just so ridiculous and out there, and I look forward to talking about that one as well. But Sleepaway Camp 3 definitely is fun, but I think it's definitely the weakest of the original trilogy. Now, it's not the worst one in the series, of course. We did get Return to Sleepaway Camp, and then we got Sleepaway Camp 4, The Survivor, which this box set that I have actually has like some production footage for Sleepaway Camp The Survivor. That one took forever to come out. I've only seen Return to Sleepaway Camp like one time. I don't really remember liking it very much, and I think that a lot of people kind of share that opinion. I don't think that one's really highly regarded. But I'm probably going to watch it again so I can actually do a review over it. But for the time being, I definitely want to just kind of get the first three out of the way, because in my mind, those are pretty much the only ones that exist. To me, anyway. Those are the ones that I prefer. It's definitely a great trilogy, fun little movies, and this one, honestly, you could watch this one on its own and be perfectly content. You wouldn't really have to move on from there, but I urge everyone to, if you like this one, definitely check out Sleepaway Camp 2. It's a fun time. It kind of reminds me more of something like Slumber Party Massacre a little bit, especially the second one in that franchise, because it has that level of schlockiness and silliness that movie has. So I look forward to talking about Sleepaway Camp 2. But anyway, this is a great first entry in this franchise. Fun movie. Again, highly recommend it. Can't recommend it enough. Definitely go check this out. I have a friend of mine, Kyle. He really, really loves Sleepaway Camp. Loves Sleepaway Camp to death. I think that's probably his favorite, one of his favorite horror movies of all time. I wouldn't say that it's probably one of my favorites by any means, and that's nothing against anybody who does love this movie. But it's definitely up there. And like I said, this is one that I find myself always kind of wanting to put on, especially the sequel. Always wanting to put on again around this time of year when it starts to warm up, and we're kind of getting into spring and into summertime. It's just, I think it's perfect for this time of year. Great movie. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Stay tuned for the next episode, and as always, have a great night and goodbye.